Hey people, how's it going? I'm back talking about this coronavirus thing again. Um, again, Once again, I'm not a medical expert, and I'm not actually even a very good YouTuber. I mostly try to, do research for my own personal interests. I don't usually try to make a well, formatted, well-structured, outlined argument. But that's not actually what I'm trying to teach people with this kind of a video anyway. What I want to actually teach people, and I'm not going to do a very good job of that either, is I want people to look some of this stuff up for themselves because here we are. We're months into this. It's April 11th today, and this is still ongoing. This whole corona pandemic is still ongoing. I really thought it would have died down by now, but I miscalculated a few things, which I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to show you how to calculate them also. So I've been all over the internet, driving myself nuts, arguing with everybody. Total waste of time. But, what else are we supposed to do? We're not supposed to do a whole lot else lately. We're not supposed to be going out. We're not supposed to go out in the sunshine where the sun's direct sunlight would kill the virus. We're not supposed to go out in the warmth and jog and feel the warmth of spring and coming into summer because we got to hide in our houses, even though every year. Here, I'll just talk about that. Anyway, I'll get back into that in a second. So I've been all over the internet, like I said. I've been all over Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, different message boards on different news sites, trying to get people to look at some of these numbers for themselves. It doesn't work. Out of probably thousands of people who've downvoted or disliked or banned or insulted me, I mean, I've lost count of how many times I've been told I'm a retard. Not once, and out of those thousands of people dumping on my opinion or dumping on my information, has anybody actually given me a single fact. It's gotten to the point where I generally don't engage people unless they can prove to me that they've looked up a single fact. And finally, today, like a month and a half of arguing with people about this, somebody actually looked up a single fact. I'm so proud of this guy right here, Ezekiel. He's calling me all sorts of names. He's telling me I'm wrong and an idiot. But he actually looked up actual numbers. I'm so proud of him. I'm like a proud papa watching his baby take his first steps. It's wonderful. He stumbled, but he tried, and that's very important. So what I'm going to talk about is how you should actually form your opinion. Okay? There's this concept. It's called reasoning. No, but more specifically, there's a methodology for formulating your conclusions. It's called the trivium method. It's based on three parts. Number one, they historically called the grammar, but it's basically getting your facts. You need to get your evidence. You need to get your actual data sources, your data points. And then second is called the logic, and it's still pretty much called logic today. And it's basically you take your facts and you see if they fit together in a way that it is not contradictory. If you put your facts together and they contradict each other, let me just look some of this up. Okay, well, just look it up, trivium method. But if you put your facts together in such a way that they are not contradicting each other, you're doing it right, generally. If you have, some facts and you're trying to put them together, and then some things don't fit with other things, you need to re-examine your facts. One of them must be wrong. Either it might not necessarily be the majority of the facts that are right either. The majority of the facts could be wrong. The outlier could be the clue of the actual right track. You never know. You got to dig further into your sources. You got to dig further into how the data was gathered. You got to make sure you understand exactly what it means. But yeah, so then if you get your data and you get your logic and it all fits together in a non-contradictory way, you can form a conclusion. That's what was historically called the rhetoric. That word has kind of taken on different meanings now, but basically you base your conclusion on your logic, which is based on your facts. And it's also called, what is it called? I can't remember. There's other ways of terming it, like wisdom was the rhetorical phase, knowledge, and I can't remember the other parts. Anyway, look it up. That's not really the main focus. But I'm going to use that method. That's what I do all the time. I use this method. I try to get the facts. I don't just watch the media. The media will tell you, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. Millions will die, millions will die. We're all going to die. We all got to hide in our house. Fear, 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 all day long. Just be afraid. And if anybody is not afraid enough, you need to attack them because they're a danger to you. They never at any point actually go into the facts. They don't go into the data. They don't go into the logic. They don't go into how people questioning are a threat to you. It doesn't make any sense. It's not reasonable. So anyway, so this guy actually gave me facts. Bravo for him. He sees some numbers. He says they're they're smaller than other numbers. Therefore, I'm retarded, more or less. So let's go into these numbers, though, because you got to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So he's saying the CDC's website says 62,000 flu deaths in a year. That is close to the average. The average has kind of raised in the last 10 years, apparently. The average used to be closer to 40,000. But apparently it's gone up in recent years because year before last, the flu season killed 80,000 people, which is higher than usual. And that kind of stuff raises the average. So, and he's also saying, so he says that's for a whole year. Technically, the CDC's flu seasons they don't even cover a whole year. They cover, generally 5 to 7 months of the year. And they, let's see if we can find it on here. And I was actually already there earlier. Okay, here it is. So they generally start, in the fall or winter, and then they go into the spring, into summer. And that's usually where it ends, and it peaks, around the middle of the winter. And that's the way they record them because it dies off every year when it starts getting hotter. As soon as it starts getting hotter, people start going outside. People start getting direct sunlight. They start getting more vitamin D. The temperatures are hotter. The virus survives outside the body a lot less. And it dies off. The spread rate dies. The spread rate dies, and less people get it, and the flu season ends. That's why they record it that way. So the first thing that I pointed out to him is that he's comparing. He wanted to call it a year of the flu season to 5 months of COVID, but the year of the flu is really about 5 to 6 months. So it is pretty close comparison, 5 to 6 months of one to 5 to 6 months of the other. But this is why I brought up the trivia method. He's got some facts. I've got some facts. They don't fit. There's a difference. So what is it? Is his logic bad? Is the facts bad? A little bit of both, because he's using the facts incorrectly. The facts are actually right. These are accurate numbers in a way, but he's misunderstanding their meaning, because here's one of the stats trackers for COVID-19. And as you can see, he's comparing a number like this, which is worldwide. This is a worldwide deaths so far number. That's what it's supposed to mean. And he's comparing that to the U.S. number, the U.S. only number. CDC's only tracking these numbers for the U.S. only. So these are the estimated rates for, am I in the right spot? All ages. Just the right year. These are the, is this right? Okay, so I guess we want a number like this. He's comparing, it's essentially a number like this for the U.S. only to worldwide deaths for the COVID-19. So he's comparing deaths to deaths. He's comparing the right time range, more or less, but he's comparing the wrong regions. The United States, I think, is only about 5% of the world's population. And apparently we're 1/5 of the death rate now, which is really a telling sign that something isn't adding up. We should not be 5%, which is 1/20th of the world population, and be 1/5 of the death. That's very unusual. So we can talk about that in a second. We can look into that. We'll look at the numbers. So this number has gone up quite a bit in the last, week or so. Only less than a week ago, I think it was still barely 10,000. So it's almost doubled in less than a week. That's pretty extreme. And most of the numbers are actually coming from one city in the entire United States. Why can't I click on this? What's happening? What the hell? Damn thing is dead. Let me try it again. Okay, now it suddenly works. Alright, so yeah, as you can see, this is the total U.S., and this is for one city alone, New York. Not even one state. That is one state. But it's mostly one city in that one state. So that's very unusual. What the hell is going on in New York? Because it's a populated city, sure, but there's populated cities all over California that reacted very slowly to this, and not very wisely, according to the official fear-mongering. And where is California? Did I pass it? Here it is. It's down quite a bit. It's very populated. It's got very big cities. LA's huge. San Francisco's huge. Why is it literally? Look at this. That's a huge difference. So I'm going to speculate on that. I don't have definitive proof of anything yet, but that's the whole problem. Is a whole lot of this is really hard to definitively say what the heck's going on, because it seems like people who are collecting stats are being deliberately deceptive about what those stats mean. I'm going to talk about that. This video is going to get way too long. Anyway, so I'll try and breeze through some more of this. So, anyway, thanks, Ezekiel. You did a great job looking up some numbers for yourself. I'm proud of you. But make sure you're comparing apples, not apples to oranges. You got to compare the same regions. But great work. It's a good first step. It's really actually alarming how few people actually look up any facts to base their opinions off of. This is the first time, like I said, out of thousands of people, at least 1,000. Hundreds and hundreds of direct interactions, thousands of downvotes, thousands of dislikes and mocks. First time anybody actually gave me one single statistic. And I ask almost every damn time now, because as soon as people start revealing their ignorance by their assumptions, I just ask them if they've looked up the flu numbers for an average year, the pneumonia numbers for an average year, and the COVID numbers for this year. Because those are extremely telling. Just those three pieces of data, which those were the first three I looked up. Two of them were the first two I looked up: the flu numbers and the and the COVID numbers. You look them up, and there's other sources that are a little bit more definitive about how many people they think actually died. Is this the right year? I could have sworn it was higher before. Anyway, so they also have pneumonia numbers, I think, also on this same site. So my first video I made, I speculated that we would not see the COVID numbers go beyond the average influenza numbers alone. But they actually also classify pneumonia deaths separately. So there's influenza and there's viral pneumonia, which are similar. One can cause the other, more or less. And the symptoms are also extremely similar to what they originally said one of the strains of the coronavirus did. So my guess was that there would be a fair amount of accidental misclassification of flu and pneumonia cases as anyway, what was I saying? Let me see if I can find some good graphs. I've seen some really interesting graphs about this, but I really didn't keep enough links to this stuff. So what I was saying was I figured they'd classify a good number of those. That's why I said from the very get-go that you need to compare the number of flu cases plus COVID cases to the average number of flu cases. And I assumed that it wouldn't go beyond. And so far, it still hasn't. It hasn't actually even come close. But it's getting closer. I mean, at this rate, it might pass it. I mean, usually the flu season is about dead by now. Here's an interesting piece of data that I found. And this has been apparently verified by a handful of YouTubers who looked it up on the CDC's website. I haven't done it myself, and I'm going to take their word for it. But check it out. They're showing the yearly pneumonia deaths that are tracked by the CDC per week going way down since this whole COVID thing started. Now, you see, this is a normal infectious season of, peaks and valleys for a normal year. This is around when winter would be. See, that's week 1. There's 52 weeks. So this is around the middle of the winter when it peaks. The flu is more or less the same way. But usually it steps down over time like so. This year, it didn't even get nearly as high. And see, they diagnose these after the fact. I mean, the numbers are kind of collated and counted after the fact. So if you are later classifying a death here, like around here, well after the COVID scare has started, you'll classify based on what you think it is after the fact. And I'm going to get into how they do that in a second, and it'll be counted differently. So it's not being counted as a pneumonia anymore, and you can see the numbers dropping. I'm almost positive when we see the collation of the weekly numbers for the influenza, we'll see a similar massive decline there. So they're definitely misclassifying a lot of numbers from the flu and pneumonia as COVID-19. That's going to make up a good number of the numbers that a good amount of the numbers that we see on this chart here. And there's some countries that are doing it much more blatantly than others, and the United States is the worst offender for this now. It used to be Italy. Italy was definitely doing it, and several of their health ministers came forward and said that the actual death rates from COVID-19 were closer to 2 to 18% of the reported numbers. 2 to 18%. And at the time, this was like a month ago, at the time the cases they would confirm out of their 8,000 at the time, let's see what they're out today, were 2. 2 out of 8,000 is how many they actually could definitely confirm didn't have comorbidity factors. Okay, so their numbers have doubled since then, which is, still kind of absurd. But USA's have been just growing a lot more, mostly in New York. And New York is leading the charge. You could claim there's a lot more densely packed people, but I guarantee you, people are traveling around the country. People who have been in New York are going to other populated city centers, and we're not seeing this exploding spread. I'll talk about that in a second. Okay, I'm going on a lot of different tangents. So that was my original speculation, and so far we're well under. So this is the total deaths for the U.S., 20,000. That's actually what I estimated the maximum would peak out at for the U.S. I didn't think it would go any higher than this, but I was missing 2 pieces that are very important. Number one, I assumed that their misclassification was going to be accidental, based on good faith guesses. But it's not accidental. It's policy. They are doing it on purpose. And there's a bunch of medical experts who are on both sides of this. There's medical experts saying it's a conspiracy theory, and then there are medical experts who are saying they're being told that they have to do it. And they're being told that by federal organizations. They're being told that by the CDC. And they're being told that by hospital management, because they're getting paid to. They're getting money from the federal government from one of these bills they're getting $13,000 per COVID-19 case. Hold on, let me show you another article here. Not only are they getting paid to do it, here's a video. This is one of the big, talking, telling you how terrible this is. There's two main ones. One of them says this is a conspiracy theory. The other one says
World Health Organization. That's the World Health Organization. Vast amounts of money from vast amounts of money from the United States.
All right, hold on. Let me turn this off. Or let's see if the woman comes up and says it.
Hold on money
no,
spent.
Not on that one. So Dr. Birx is who we're looking for. Is this it? It is not blank. Oh, here we go.
Here in the United States, so far.
Who do we have on this one? I could have sworn I saw a video with her actually saying it. Because I remember her saying that they were... let me just look it up. Part of the problem with trying to refer back to my sources is, number one, half of them have been deleted, and the other half have been modified. And that's from the ones I'm keeping. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, so basically what she gets into... Let me see if I can find it. The intent is if someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that as a COVID-19 death. Okay, so this is what I said would happen day one, because I've seen it before. They've done this on other so-called epidemics. If you have a characteristic of any sort, it can be completely coincidental, and you die, and they count you as a statistic of a death for that random characteristic, you can show, based on the way you change the classification of death, that the death rates are exploding. I don't know if I used the example before, but if you just spontaneously declared that having red hair was a deadly disease, and then you started counting every death of somebody who has red hair as, gingivitis, and you would be able to show a sudden spike in deaths that seems to grow and grow day by day as this policy is put into place around the world. And you would be able to show gingivitis is a super deadly disease that kills redheads, has 100% mortality over time, and everybody would be able to freak out if they were foolish enough. And that's essentially what could be going on here. COVID-19, or the SARS-CoV-2 that they're supposedly testing for, if you have it and you die, you're a COVID-19 death. But there's an important thing to recognize here. This is the word that's an important one here. With, not from. So if you have heart disease, if you have lung cancer, if you've got a brain tumor, if you've died in a car accident, and you have COVID-19, so you've died with COVID-19, they're counting that as a COVID-19 death. So this number right here for the U.S., they're not doing this in every country. They're doing it in the U.S. If you have COVID-19, you are part of this number, whether you died from it or not. So you fall down the stairs and you have so-called COVID-19. You're a statistic, part of that number. So why is that important? Because it might not have killed you, for one thing. So why else? How else would this number have gotten so big? Let's explore other factors. Here's another one that is very absurd. Presumptive. Okay, look for this. Look for some of these keywords. Presumptive positive cases of COVID-19. They're so deceptive to call it presumptive and positive. Positive seems to imply that it's been confirmed, but no. They're counting presumptive and confirmed. And the reason why they have that mentioned specifically over and over throughout this article is because presumptive cases are not confirmed. So presumptive positive cases are also not confirmed. It's very deceptive, but it is spelled out. If you actually understand the English language, you can read what they mean by this crap. Okay, let's look up what the word presumptive means for everybody. The nature of presumption, presumed, in the absence of further information. In this case, the further information is positive test results. So they're presuming you're a COVID-19 case in the absence of positive test results. That's where this confirmed word here comes in. That's supposed to be with test results. So these numbers all over these types of places, they call it confirmed, and they've changed this site. I wish I had gotten more screenshots of it before they changed it, but they used to show, there used to be a breakdown where you could actually go to a city on the map, and it would say confirmed, and it would say reported, and it's gone now. And now they're just saying confirmed, but these aren't confirmed numbers, because as you can see, these numbers come from places like the CDC and reports. These are confirmed plus presumptive, not confirmed. And now they've made it harder than ever. This was one of the only sources I knew where you could actually find test confirmed numbers. And they've changed it now. Now they've just lumped all presumed into confirmed. They're just calling it confirmed. It's not accurate. These numbers, as you can see, match the presumptive plus confirmed numbers reported everywhere else. Now they're just calling them confirmed. So the big red scaremonger chart that's so terrifying with all the big red dots, they are fucking liars. They're no longer telling you the difference between... They already were hiding it, where you had to go all the way into breakouts and you had to go and look. Maybe I just forgot exactly where to look, but I could have sworn it was you'd click on a breakout and then it would tell you around here where the confirmed numbers were, and now they all just say confirmed. But the numbers didn't go down. I mean, the confirmed numbers were less than a third to a half of the presumptive, the total numbers, which includes presumptive. But they got rid of it, so I can't find it. And that's one of the things I've been complaining about on the CDC the whole time, is you cannot find actual positive test result numbers. I cannot find them. And I've been looking. And they seem to be deliberately hiding them, and they constantly lump them together with presumptive numbers. It's very, very frustrating. And to make matters worse, let's see if I can find this again. They keep making it harder and harder to find stuff. Let me just look up the numbers. Oops. I don't know if I'll be able to look for such an odd thing. All right. Go away. Okay, Minnesota doctor blasts ridiculous CDC coronavirus death count.
My next guest is a doctor and state senator in Minnesota who is deeply troubled by the CDC's latest guidance.
Let me see if I can
for
find
counting COVID deaths. Dr. Scott Jensen
bits.
joins me now. Doctor, I want to read for our viewers what the CDC says in part about how to count COVID deaths relating to that last issue we just raised.
Right now, Medicare has determined that if you have COVID-19 admission, a COVID-19 admission to the hospital, you'll get paid $13,000. If that COVID-19 patient goes on a ventilator, you get $39,000. I heard on another source that it was $39,000 per diagnosed death. So I'll have to go and look at that. We'll just check our facts again. 3 times as much. Nobody can tell me after 35 years. Okay, so this is his direct quote from the video. He might be wrong on that part. Or maybe my other source is wrong on the 39,000. Anyway, this is the kind of thoughts that are always going through my head. You see facts, something doesn't line up, note it. It's important that you note when you find a contradicting fact and look it up. Or you can also just not be sure. Like, it's totally valid to not be sure in your head. You don't have to reach a conclusive conclusion, okay? So you can see facts coming in from competing sources that seem to point to a competing conclusion, and you could still hold both of them in your mind as possible and not known, unresolved yet. You don't have to always be 100% sure that this guy said a stat that I don't agree with. He's retarded. No, you don't have to come to such absurd conclusions based on bad assumptions. Just, keep collecting data, see which picture paints a clearer, conclusion. Anyway, all right, so let me get back to this. 13,000 to 39,000. Okay, so why is this a problem? So this is what's called in market economics perverse incentives. It's when you incentivize something that leads to unnatural or harmful outcomes. And if you incentivize people to diagnose people with COVID-19 Okay, let's put these pieces together. We got 3 pieces, and I've just explained 2 of them. They're incentivizing people to diagnose people with COVID-19. You get paid, okay? So the more people they can positively identify as COVID-19, the better so far. That's better for the hospital. The hospital will give you more money. So that's one piece. That's already a little alarming because this will give them an unnatural incentive to test people for COVID-19 and report them as a COVID-19 death, even if they didn't die from COVID-19. So that could lead to some bad numbers. But surely you can't report people as COVID-19 deaths if they die from other comorbidity factors. But as we've already talked about, yes, that's exactly what they want you to do. They're being instructed specifically. When I first read this, I thought she was mad about it because I've seen many other hundreds of doctors from all over the world pointing out that you can't do that, don't do that, we shouldn't do that. Are we doing that? And when I saw her talking about this, I thought, oh no, she's also stumbled onto this, it's called statistical misclassification. Let's look that one up. Okay, definition. When a subject is falsely classified into a category in which the subject does not belong. In analytics, there's other things that this can often be called. Cannibalization. It's when you change the way you're recording something, you notice a spike in one area, but you'll notice a corresponding drop in another area. That's the cannibalized statistic. That's what I assumed we would see in our numbers for... Where'd that go? Anyway, I got too many tiny tabs open. That's what I assumed we'd see in pneumonia and influenza. And we are seeing that. We're seeing that to a pretty dramatic effect, which will probably explain a fair number of these COVID-19 cases. This 20,000 should likely be quite a bit smaller. How much smaller? It's really hard to tell because these numbers, like I said, they include presumptive plus test results. So these are not test-confirmed numbers. So, all right, back to where I was. Okay, statistical misclassification. So two of the parts of a really alarming recipe for really bad numbers are in place. They're definitely incentivized to classify things as COVID-19, and they're encouraged to do so. They're not even considered wrong to do so. It's encouraged to do so. Those are 2 pieces of... Those alone are a terrible recipe for misclassification. But there's another one, which I don't have as good of information on. But the test itself is very suspicious. So there's several tests out there. There's at least 3 that I know of, and they're all fraught with error. They're all super flawed. Okay, so we'll talk about the reverse transcriptase PCR test. This is a big, crazy word that basically means they take some genetic material and they put it in a medium which continues to react over and over, trying to duplicate some genetic sample. It's basically, they run it through a sequence where they basically copy it over and over and over and over and over. And they can copy it any number of times. And they amplify the amount of genetic material in the sample. So you get a test sample, you run this process 20 times, 60 times, whatever it is, and you replicate the number of your genetic samples in there basically. An insane number of times. So that then it's very clear what was in the original sample. The problem is that when you take a test sample, you get a ton of genetic samples. It's not just one gene. It's just not one piece. It's not just one target that you're looking for. You get all these sorts of genetic samples. You get the person's genetic samples. You get all sorts of random antibody samples. You get all sorts of retroviral samples. You get a bunch of virus samples. You get bacterial samples. You just get a ton of samples, and you have no idea what any of them are necessarily. And then you multiply them out the wazoo 60 times or whatever. And then you can go through and look. It makes it easier to see the occurrence of even a small number of genetic samples in the post-multiplied sample. So it basically lets you look for any occurrence of genetic sample in the final result. And the more times they multiply it, the more likely they are to detect tinier and tinier bits of the original sample. So let's look up a little bit more about this. You can look into that further. So basically it sets it up where it lets them copy. It does basically what your body does. I mean, your body generally unzips your DNA and it recombines it with a new other half, and then later on they can unzip it and recopy. So it does something similar. I'm pretty sure it only works on genetic material because it's designed. That's what it's designed for, is to work on genetic material. So let's look up a little bit about this real quick. Is this the same place? Okay, check this guy out. So this guy's an interesting character. I recommend looking more into some of this guy's career because he actually, if he was alive today, he'd probably be blowing his lid over them using his test to paint the picture that they're painting about the danger of COVID-19 today. Because, first of all, he said specifically, this is not to be used for testing for infectious material. Because in order for you to actually suffer from illness, from an infection, it has to have multiplied a ton. I mean, it multiplies crazily. And you have to have so much of it in there that your immune system's overreaction to try and stop the spread is causing you symptoms. I mean, a lot of the times the symptoms you're actually experiencing, like if you get a lung infection, it's the virus itself is not doing as much damage as all the phlegm, all the pus, all the white blood cells collecting in there, trying to fight the infection. That's what's going to cause more breathing problems for you than the virus itself. And that's generally how people take immune suppressant drugs even when they don't have infections, because the immune system can cause so many problems even when it's not fighting an infection. Anywho, let's see. Let me get back to my point. So yeah, he said not to use it for not to use it for testing for infections, and they usually don't use it for testing for infections. They use this test to test for the presence of certain very hard to find things, and you can't use it for infection testing because you don't know how much was in the original sample. You'll see doctors arguing about this a lot lately, but generally, previously, it was relatively well understood that you don't use this test for detecting for infections because you can't be sure what the original sample size of any of the genetic material was, because it could multiply at uneven rates as you continue to multiply over and over. Some genetic samples might multiply 60 times. Others might only multiply 10. The ratio won't remain the same in the final sample, in the final result. So you can't be sure that the number of the viral load that you had in the original test is anywhere near remotely concerning to your immune system or your health, because most of us are walking around with all sorts of viruses floating around in our bloodstream, running around on our tissues, and we don't even notice because their numbers are very tiny. The immune system already knows to look out for them and already takes them out, gets rid of them before they can get to concerning numbers. So if you test the average person with chicken pox, they'll still test positive, even though they don't have any symptoms from the chicken pox today. They haven't had chicken pox in 30 years, but they'll still test positive if you use this test because it looks for genetic material, and most people are infected with chicken pox technically for the rest of your life. It never technically goes away. There's always a small number of it still replicating in your bloodstream, and when your immune system gets weak later in life, it can represent symptoms. That's what shingles are. Anyway, so that's why they don't use this test. Okay, so that's one test that's bad. There was another test, I think it's actually based on the same method, that the Chinese government was exporting all over Europe and parts of the United States were requested. And at first, and a whole bunch of European countries did tests on these tests and the masks and found that they were infected. And now that's what the test said. The test said it was infected. So either the tests actually were pre-infected with, the virus, or it was giving false positives constantly. And they just ran the test without any sample whatsoever, and it tested positive. I don't know much about that test because most of the places that actually tested the test found it to be terrible, and they didn't really use it. So there's not as much information I can find on that one. And the third test they're using that I know of, there could be other tests. Apparently there's a whole bunch of providers that are coming on the market with so many tests, there's no way I could possibly keep track of how they work and what their errors might be. But just be aware that not all these tests mean the same thing. This one looks for a tiny amount of genetic material. And the other problem is that the genetic material they're looking for is not SARS-CoV-2. It's not. What they're looking for is genetic samples that were detected in the lungs of some of the people who originally died in Wuhan. So these people died, and they did a test, and okay, oops, how did that get so big? All right. So they did a test. They collected some genetic samples from the damaged lungs of some of the people who died in Wuhan. And the problem with this is that collecting genetic samples is really hard to figure out what you're collecting. Okay, so they go and they look under a microscope and they look for pictures of they look for pictures of what they think could be the culprit, and they see what they think is a virus. The problem is this virus looks an awful lot like another type of cell called exosomes. Exosomes are they're still trying to figure out what the heck exosomes are, but it seems to be that there's some sort of cellular signaler that your body's cells might manufacture to send signals to other cells. Like, for example, I've been damaged. There's a toxin in here that's upset my cellular homogeneity. It's spreading around. It's to basically give a warning to other cells in the area that there's a problem, there's a threat. Harden yourselves, be careful what you take in, this sort of thing. It's a signaler. So if you, for example, had a dead person and you notice that he can't breathe, so you say, oh, his lungs must be wrong, let's check his lungs. Okay, we're looking for some sort of virus. They find a thing that looks like a virus, and they collect it, they try to get genetic samples from it, and they're still not totally sure what they're getting the genetic samples of when they try to get these samples. So they get some samples, they think this must be the virus, let's test for that. But the problem is, if they tested for genetic samples from an exosome that will be released in damaged lungs, they could potentially be looking for genetic samples that are completely normal in a completely otherwise generally healthy person who's suffering any sort of lung distress. That's what they could be looking for. So that test that looks for that gene sample could potentially give a false positive for COVID-19 anytime someone is suffering from some sort of cellular distress in their lungs. Or even worse, it could be cellular distress anywhere. We have no idea. And doctors are talking about this, and they're admitting it's a problem, and they're being told to shut up because it's conspiracy theory. But more and more of them are speaking up. And anyway, so that's one of the other tests. There's another test that they're doing, antibody tests. They're using antibody tests. The problem with the antibody test is that it tests for any strain of coronavirus. Let me see if I can find this. It's really hard to refer back to all my sources. Let's see if I can find one of them. All right, here's a video. Hold on. I got another window. All right, let's check this guy. I love this guy right here. Computing Forever.
Cause of death is...
I recognize this guy's channel. I recommend this guy's channel. He's great. He started his videos. He was getting into this, and he was talking about the the threat of this. Okay, watch the transition. So I was subscribed to this guy, and I get his channels all the time. He's got some great topics. Anyway, so he was going along. He starts talking about coronavirus and the dangers of denial. Okay, so he's going along. He's got some more funny videos. So more or less, he was on board with the hype train. This is terrifying, blah, blah, blah. Everybody look out. It's terrifying. It's so dangerous. And then he starts talking about, are we overreacting? What about the other consequences? And then he starts talking to different experts who have been sounding the alarm for some time about the dangers of misclassifying different diseases as COVID-19 and getting inaccurate numbers and not knowing what the confirmed cases without comorbidity factors actually are. Tons of doctors are talking about this. This is one of them. He actually covers a whole bunch of other ones on some of his other videos. But they all look the same. I can't tell which ones have which data anymore. He's got a lot of them. But yeah, YouTube totally stopped recommending me all of his videos around the time when he started changing his mind. What do you know? How odd is that?
Death is put down as them dying from the COVID-19 coronavirus.
So here he is talking
even
about,
if COVID-19 was not the cause of their death.
So yeah, this is one of this.
Professor Dr. Sucharit Bhakti. He's a medical microbiologist and infectious disease epidemiologist, and he said, in my conviction,
this guy speaks in German, so we had to put translations down here.
Is
basically, he's pointing out that we don't know exactly what the test-confirmed cases are, and we don't know what the cases of actual deaths from COVID-19, not deaths with COVID-19. Apparently, Germany has heard this kind of a warning and been more careful about it. They've stopped diagnosing so liberally their cases. Let's see, how many minutes am I? This is getting a long video. Anyway, I should probably just break this up into many videos, but I'm just not a great YouTuber. I don't structure any of this. I kind of just go on tangents and show you how I think, and hopefully, people actually go about looking at some of this stuff. Anyway, so he was talking about some other things on here as well. Let's see if I can find it. What was I talking about originally? The antibody test? Oh, yeah, that's right. This guy. I was looking for this expert here. This is the one I was actually looking for. So he's talking about...
Von 0,1%. Das ist schon die Obergrenze eigentlich. Das heißt, es sterben
the number of COVID-19 cases. Coronavirus. Corona cases.
Are panicking officials into ill-advised lockdown.
I really ought to track some of these sources down beforehand so I can just reference them real quick. But, this is more of a cathartic activity for me to try and vent my stress by talking about it to people who hopefully have some interest in it. Because if you just argue with people on Facebook and Reddit, nobody actually gives a crap what you're saying. They don't address any of your arguments. They don't address any data. They don't even know any data. Somewhere in here, this expert right here is talking about how, and I probably could find this if I... It's really hard to find any of this information today, because if you look up anything about coronavirus, you're only going to find recent information about this today. But I mean, the fact that I'm trying to find and reference here, and doing a terrible job of, is that on an average year, 15% of common cold viruses are a strain of coronavirus. It's not a new virus. It's not new. It just hasn't been tested for very carefully before because it's so minor. It's relatively harmless. The only one that's been remotely harmful in the past was SARS, which I think is supposed to be a strain of coronavirus. And even it was not anywhere near the amount of overreaction we're having to this one. So it's supposed to be 7 to 15% of the common cold viruses that we all occasionally suffer from every day are coronavirus strains. So the antibody test that they're using for this COVID-19 confirmation, first of all, if you test for an antibody, that doesn't mean that you're actually suffering from it. If you've gotten over COVID-19, you'll test positive on an antibody test because you've already built up an immunity to it. The immunities Having an immunity to something means your body can produce the antibodies to fight it off and keep it at low or gone numbers. And so if they find antibodies, you've already had it and you've beaten it, more or less. I mean, if you're producing antibodies, you're well on the way to beating it. Or you've beat it years ago, because if you get antibodies from an actual active virus that your body recognizes as a serious threat, the antibodies can last for years, decades maybe. So if you've had, the coronavirus in the last 15 years, which apparently most of us very likely will have had, you will test positive for an antibody test for coronavirus. Because the antibody test they're using doesn't test for a specific strain. Generally, the way antibody tests works is they search for certain markers that are supposed to be related to the antibody. They don't even test for the whole antibody. So it's very unprecise. Let's see, there was one other thing I was going to look for real quick. I forgot what it was. Too many tangents. Anyway, so let's see. I've covered the three different tests, the flaws with all three, massive flaws. I've covered the problem with misclassification being incentivized, and I've covered the problem with tracking your stats as presumptive plus confirmed. So that means all these people with bad tests, inaccurate tests, plus presumed without testing, based on incentives of getting paid a lot of money, are all lumped into this number, which is supposed to be terrifying to us. And it is awful. 20,000 people dying is never something to just, ignore. But it happens every year. I mean, we lose 60,000 people to infectious diseases every year. Let's see. It's probably way higher than that. Let's just look up some more stats. Fun with facts, fun with data, okay? Everybody learn how to look up facts, please. Number of deaths. Okay, this is data for the United States only. Number of deaths. What year is this? Where am I at? CDC? Okay. Why doesn't it say what year this is? Deaths, 2017. Okay. Number of deaths in 1 year. Okay, this is from all the different sources, though. 2.8 million. Okay, we're at. Okay, did anyone notice like a terrifying anomaly from these 2.8 million people who died in 2017? I didn't. I'm sure everybody noticed one or two people that they cared about go, and that's a shame. But people die. People die every year. It's a fact of life that it ends one day. You too will die. Everyone will die. Nobody has gotten out of this alive yet. So, 20,000 out of 2.8 million. I mean, let me just let's do some basic math here. Okay, that's not even 1%. It's less than 1%. So we have a less than 1% increase. And so, by the way, some people apparently don't know basic math. When you get these ratios like this, if you want to see what the actual percent would be, like if you put it with a percent sign behind it, like this, you have to remultiply it by 100. A percent basically means per 100. Cent means 100. So per 100. So you got to multiply it back by 100. Okay. I don't know why. I'm constantly amazed by the stuff people come to me with. I've been arguing about this a lot lately, and I just wouldn't believe some of the arguments that have been thrown in my face to prove to me what a retard I am. People don't know common math. I'm not trying to be arrogant or a jackass, but I mean, if you don't know this stuff, you should not be going around telling people what a retard they are. If you don't know it, that's fine, Some people don't know it. But if you don't know it, don't delude yourself into thinking what a genius you are and telling everybody else with emphatic confidence what a retard they are. Ugh. Anyway, so it's less than 1%, okay? That's what I'm getting at. So that's the total number of deaths. But let's break it down a little bit. Influenza and pneumonia. So that's 2017. It's lower than 2018, I'm sure, because there was a spike where it was 80,000 for influenza alone, 2018 to 2019. But some of these other diseases could easily, even almost accidentally, be lumped into this new number, given the incentives we've seen that they have to misclassify these numbers, and given the apparent complete lack of consequences for deliberately lying to people. Okay, all right, let me go back. Where am I? All right, high numbers. Many of these other things could be, they're not sudden and accidental deaths. They're failing health that generally happens slowly over time. You could get infections while you're weak in the hospital. You got a weakened immune system. Many of these could easily be also considered COVID-19, and probably are. They definitely are, because I've already seen, I'm not going to get into dozens and dozens of cases, but if you want to see something about that, check out this guy, Computing Forever. He's done a great job of analyzing a handful of cases, maybe a dozen, himself alone, and then there's another guy I really like. Christian. This guy right here, he's great. He's doing a great job of dissecting some of this data too. I went to the wrong place. That's not where I want to go. I want to see him on YouTube. Here he is. This is the guy. Wait, is it the guy? Why is there two channels? Why are there two links? Okay, this is the guy. This is the guy right here. Look this guy up. He goes into case by case by case by case individually. He breaks them down. He gets into the data. He sees the testimony from family members. He sees the actual death reports. He talks about all that. And they're classifying people falling down the stairs as COVID-19. They're classifying car accidents as COVID-19. They're all sorts of stuff. And it's gonna go on. I've created the perfect climate for bad numbers, and I've already talked about that. So we're going to see this number way higher than it really is, all across the United States. That's another thing we should probably do. Actually, let's look at that. Let's see. Is it actually just listed here? Percentages. Deaths per 1 million population. Yeah, let's scroll through here. Okay. This is per population total, not per infected, though. What I'd like to see... No, they don't have it. But yeah, there's some interesting anomalies on this list. Why are the differences so extreme between... If we're talking about the same exact virus, why are these numbers so broadly different? Now, there's going to be some differences from population density. That's probably a huge factor. But I mean, it's not as if these other countries don't have large cities. I mean, China has cities with tens of millions of people in them. Like unheard of cities in the U.S., cities that we would have never heard of. Like I never heard of Wuhan before. They've got more people in Wuhan. Let's see, what's the population of New York? It's got more population in one city than some unknown of city than one of our biggest cities. Is this the biggest city? Anyway, I'm getting off on another tangent. I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, look at the numbers. Follow some of these threads. I've followed plenty of these threads, and the picture it's painting to me is that number that we've all been told to be terrified of. I prefer this site here, even though it's not much more clear what the confirmed versus presumptive is on this than anywhere else. I can't find confirmed alone anywhere. Not for the U.S. But I like this site better than the John Hopkins site, because I swear, man, John Hopkins site seems to be going well out of its way to terrify you with big red giant circles over everything. I mean, the circles are misrepresenting how big this thing actually is, and the scary red colors. I mean, it's like they're trying to fuck with you, and they're also not telling us the difference between confirmed and presumptive anymore. They're just saying confirmed. That's a lie. Anyway, let me get back. All right, let me kind of try and sum up some of what I'm talking about here. So, So we've talked about how, first of all, this number, 20,000, is still just now barely a fourth of a bad flu season, of just flu alone. That's not total infectious diseases. That's not pneumonia. That's flu alone is 80,000 a couple of years ago, 2 seasons ago. And we're barely 1/4. And if nobody noticed 80,000 people dying a couple of years ago, why the heck are we shutting down our entire economy over 20,000? Oh yeah, that's another thing I wanted to get into. I'll probably get into that in another video. Because yeah, experts have been talking about how there's a strong correlation between unemployment numbers and and suicide rates. There's a very strong, high correlation between the number of people offing themselves every year and the unemployment rates. And look at some of these numbers. $17 million. This is 3 weeks. 17 million in 3 weeks. That's terrifying. I mean, if you understand how economies work, you understand how important every role can be within an economy. If you take out one business, it's not just that one business employees who lose. It's the customers of that business, and you'll have other companies that rely on that business, and then that business is going to be impacted. It could take them time to find a new provider. They might not be able to find a new provider. They might find another provider, but the profit margins have disappeared so that they cannot afford to operate anymore now that the one business is gone. So that takes out another business. What happens then? That business's employees lose. That business's customers lose. So if you just take 10% of the economy and you say you're not allowed to work anymore, it doesn't end at 10%. That 10% affects another 15%. That 15% affects another 30%. That 30% affects the entire rest of the economy. And then that entire country's economy will affect another country. So if you just shut down 10% of one country's economy, you're going to indirectly impact the whole world to a degree. It's an unknown degree. It's not even a butterfly effect. It's like a domino effect. And if you have the entire world's economy go into lockdown all at once, you are doing years, if not decades, of damage to the infrastructure, the supply chains, people's livelihood, their retirements. And the number of deaths from that is going to dwarf. I mean, we're going to be looking at 20,000 and just wishing it was only that kind of an impact from the economic problems we're probably irreversibly going to face at this point. I mean, it's already been a month of severe economic impact. 16 million unemployment cases in the United States alone in 3 weeks alone. It's terrifying. If you understand economics, that's what you should be more concerned about, not this 20,000 we lose. Unfortunately, almost 3 million a year. 20,000 is less than 1%, okay? Anyway, yeah, the economics is just going to be terrifying. All right, there's a couple other topics I wanted to cover, but I've already gone and on for, I don't know, what has it been, 50 minutes now? Jesus. So I guess I'll talk about some other topics if these aggravations are still weighing on me in the future. But yeah, there's still the economic impact to be worried about. That's what I'm far more worried about. I'm worried about the economic impact, and I'm worried about the governmental impact of just cowardly submitting to these authoritarian measures. This is not a quarantine. Quarantines are when you take infected people and you separate them from the uninfected people. This is a full-scale authoritarian lockdown. It's unprecedented in human history to just lock down your entire population for a disease which affects less than 1% of the death rate, less than 0.01% of the population. It's unheard of. It's absurd. It's insane. It's reckless. It's dangerous. It's stupid. And that's the real thing to be concerned about. Not the chance that you might, 0.1% get, 0.01% that you might get a disease that has 2% mortality rate at best. You should be worried about the economic impact. Unfortunately, this is really going to be concerning. The sooner people get back to their lives, they reclaim their lives, reclaim their livelihood, reclaim their freedom, the better. People, get out there. Don't be terrified. Don't run around panicked if someone sneezes and coughs. Don't run around all over the place in a mask freaking out. At these tiny numbers, even with the 20,000, which I've very well illustrated, is completely overblown by design, it's still a tiny number compared to the flu, compared to infectious disease, and compared to yearly death rates. It's totally absurd. Let's look around here. Here's South Korea. Okay, look at their number. Total deaths, 211. You know why that number stopped growing entirely? Because they don't count presumptive cases. They're not counting presumptive. They're counting with tests. I also showed how the tests themselves are flawed. So even with tests and best intentions and trying to be as accurate as possible, there's still going to be a margin for misidentification that easily dwarfs these numbers. But they're trying. They're trying to do tests. I think that's the main thing that turned their numbers around, is accurate information. That's what I said before. The United States, deliberately inaccurate. That's so disappointing. Germany had inaccurate numbers previously, and then they started to try and be more careful with the way they identify their numbers. Let's have a look. They're a lot smaller than ours, percentage-wise. All right. Anywho, I guess I'll make another video in the future if people are interested in this kind of thing, talking about the big anomaly. Okay, the New York anomaly. I'm going to call it that because there's a bizarre anomaly that only seems to present itself in 5 cities in the entire world, and they just happen to be 5 of the cities which are rolling out 5G. I'm going to say it, even though apparently everybody who talks about 5G in relation to coronavirus gets their videos deleted. It's blatant. It's blatant. It's ridiculous how obvious it is, and people need to talk about it. 5G causes damage to your lungs, your red blood cells, when it's used in the 60 gigahertz range, and they're using it in the 60 gigahertz range in 4 cities in China, including Wuhan, and in New York. So, okay, I'm going to talk about that a little bit here because I've already started. Okay, let me see. I've got some sources for this. Now, I don't live in New York, so I can't go out with the wireless, device and try to pick up frequencies. But here's another YouTuber who's had a ton of her videos deleted for talking about this kind of stuff. This one is suddenly unlisted.
This is Dr. Cameron Kyle Seidel, ER and critical care doctor from New York City. 9 days ago, I opened an intensive care unit to care for the sickest COVID-positive patients in this city. In these 9 days, I've seen things I have never seen before. In treating these patients, I have witnessed medical phenomenon that just don't make sense in the context of treating.
All right, this guy's talking about how he's an ICU doctor. He's seeing a ton of cases, and he's not the only one. I've seen dozens of doctors in only one city in the world talking about this in English, New York. They're talking about people suffering from what appears to be altitude sickness. Their lungs are just not capable, even though they appear to be completely clear of infection. Their lungs appear to have radiation damage and altitude sickness, and they're not able to absorb oxygen at a normal rate anymore. I don't know if they're testing these people for red blood cells and hemoglobin. I don't know if they're checking their counts. It's a really easy blood test to do. I would certainly hope that's the first thing they started doing. But I have no idea if they're doing it. Aw, man, I hate these stupid ad blocker detectors. As if there's not enough ads on this page. You know what I like to do when they do this kind of thing? Is I go Where is it? Why can I never find what I'm looking for when I'm recording a video? Developer tools. Go to this. Inspect tool. Why does this take up like 50%? Okay, I get this one, and I see how big that element is. Just delete it. All right, there we go. I turned off my ad blocker, jackass. All right, Brooklyn Hospital is treating coronavirus patients by extracting their blood, enriching it with oxygen, then pumping it back into them when ventilators do not help. Okay, so yeah, that's another part of what this guy's talking about. Ventilators are not helping. They're trying to force air into lungs that are not infected. They aren't trying to push past, phlegm and stuff like that. The lungs are fine. They just won't absorb the oxygen. So here's doctors talking about they're trying to enrich their blood with oxygen because their red blood cells are crap. Did they talk about that in here? Yeah. This is the only place I know of that they're seeing this. And that's very alarming. There's only a handful of places that have been trying to use 5G in 60 gigahertz range. It works on other frequencies, but this is one they're going to use in the United States because it's unregulated. Anyway, so they go and roll this out in more cities. We're going to see this in more places. And unfortunately, all right, I got to stop myself because it's probably been an hour of video now. So look into that. Look into the rollout of 5G. Look at the kind of bills they've been sneaking through while everybody's told to go inside, hide inside, pay no attention to what's going on behind the curtain. They're rushing through bills to implement 5G all over the United States in the next 150 more days because they started that a month ago. And that's essential work. You're not allowed to go to work. You're not allowed to make a living. You're not allowed to provide for your family. But if you want to install 5G towers, a technology that nobody is using yet. Who's got a phone that works on 5G? Do you? Because I don't. Most phones don't. Most cellular technologies, they roll out slowly over time in populated areas as the demand rises and the devices that support it are available and in that part of the market. Instead, 5G, they're just going to try and rush it out nationwide in 150 days during a pandemic when nobody's using it. What the hell's going on? And they seem to be determined to just hide any effects to the contrary, health effects, and blame them on coronavirus. So, I don't know. I could be getting into conspiracy theory territory, but just look at the facts, man. Just look at the data. Look at the trends. Look at the places where ICU doctors are talking about this.
A viral pneumonia. 9 days ago, I presumed I was opening an intensive
care
unit.
Not viral pneumonia. Not
I've seen patients dependent on oxygen take off their oxygen and quickly progress through a state of anxiety and emotional distress.
He talks about the signs of hypooxygenation. They don't have enough oxygen. They're not getting oxygen. They're turning blue, short of breath. Their lungs are fine, but their red blood cells have been destroyed all of a sudden. How the hell does that happen? That generally doesn't happen overnight. But it did in Wuhan. It did like that. People just dropped dead into the streets. That's the only place I've seen those kind of videos coming from. So the stuff they're doing in New York, it does seem to be 5G, 60 gigahertz related, but it's apparently not as strong as what they were testing in Wuhan back in November, December. Because those people were just dropping like that, man. They were just immediately dead. No sign of infection in their lungs. And they blamed all that on a virus. Even though viruses don't do that. That's not how viruses work. You just don't die instantly from a virus. They got to build up a load, and then your immune system has to try and fight it and fail miserably for you to die from it. Anyway, that's probably enough video ranting for now. Y'all, do your due diligence, look into it. Don't just watch, the mainstream media's fear-mongering all day long and just sit in your house in the dark freaking out. That's not healthy. It's not good for you. Anxiety won't help you. Cortisol won't help you. Stress won't help you. Sunshine will help you. Get some sunshine. Get some vitamin D. Go out and about. Enjoy your life. Reclaim your livelihood. Don't live in fear. Don't listen to every stupid thing the government tells you. Don't listen to every stupid thing the media tells you. don't follow the trivia method, okay? Learn for yourself. Take the facts. Put them together logically. Form your own conclusions. Don't let talking heads on television tell you what to believe. And I'm going to call it believe, not think, because it's not thinking if you just see whatever they tell you and then do it. You got to think for yourself. All right. Y'all have a good one. Take it easy. Don't freak out. Reclaim your lives. Let's see. What was that other point of wisdom I wanted to share? Don't ramble on YouTube on and on. And don't waste your time on social media trying to argue with the shits. Have a good one. See ya.